we want to present to you what we have done in this workshop on research, and then we'll open it up for discussion. Okay?
Discussing the purpose of research, which is the first and most important thing I think that confronts us as African people, why we want to do research and what how it's going to affect our lives and what it means to us. So that's the first thing we need to address ourselves to. So since everybody here is interested in research, what we're really hoping to do is to get your ideas and criticism also, as well as ideas on these three major or most specific areas of research itself. So we all want to do, maybe we should all come down to the front so we can all hear each other and participate together and work together on this. And so what Brother Rkhty would like to do now is kind of lead us in a discussion on the topics that have been presented. The first one and the most important one being the purpose of research itself. So he's going to monitor the discussion, but the discussion has to come not from the panel, but from all of us in the room, from you. Because we've already, in a study group itself, kind of discussed this among ourselves and come up with a working idea of what the purpose of research is. But what we really want to do today is to get your inputs, your ideas, and your criticisms on what you just said.
Every great civilization that has grown has had some type of documentary, whether it's written or spoken or passed on from word from mouth ear to mouth about who they are and what they are. And with that, they have been able to extrapolate on the future. For instance, we have Christians who study the Bible, right? And because of somebody else's experience, they can chart, Armageddon or something like that, and that's such. They can actually, that's how they focus. They use that history, the example, to look at past experiences, to see connections of things arising, and then they chart it. And we need to begin a process like that where we can actually learn what we have done correctly, what we have done wrong, so that we can chart the future. Because that is the only way that you can chart the future, if you base it on your past experiences. Okay? And when we do that, when we begin this process, we must begin it with an Afrocentric point of view. And I think we need to discuss exactly what is an Afrocentric point of view for research. What does this contain? What morality does it contain? Whose interests should it serve? Whose values does it have? And whose principles should it go by? Right? And whose standards should it go by? Because we have to begin to reset the standards, right? Revise the principles, right? And reinterpret the values. Because there was only one stream of history, and that has been the African stream of history. Right? Now, the African stream of history has broken off into various different parts. And everything that has come about today is because of our experience on this globe. So we need to begin to search back and find out what was exactly our code and what were the problems that we had. Right? How did we let this European arise? Right? To such great power. What was in that? So we need to begin to chart back so that we can look at the future with an Afrocentric point of view.
Next. Okay.
What you next?
I think before we continue a little further, perhaps we can call Sister Rkhty to come and explain this a little further to us. Add some comments.
Okay. I think when we're talking about methodology, the main thing is to focus on methodology itself. Because we kind of Reggie, really understand that we need an Afrocentric perspective towards looking at history. However, we have to gain knowledge about our past and about our present. And the point of methodology is, how do you go about gaining that knowledge? How do you go about seeking that knowledge? What methods and what techniques do you use? For example, all of us read hundreds of books, I know, about I do, about African history. When we read the books, how are we reading the books? Not just how are we interpreting it, but how are we understanding it, what is our approach to reading the books and the information that's there in the books for us. Where are other places that we seek knowledge? And what are our questions about the other places and the other methods of seeking knowledge? So in other words, methodology really deals with how do we go about gaining knowledge of our past. You know, we have an Afrocentric perspective and focus when we're doing this because all the members of ASCAC really kind of understand that already and we have that already. But we still might be confused because the materials that we're reading, the places that we go for research, the people that we're talking to, the kinds of information and facts that we are gathering and collecting, what do we do with that and how do we understand that? That's a very excellent point that he made too about revisionism. Perhaps I wouldn't call, you know, the methodology that we just presented revisionism more or less, but what you said about creating new methods, creating new ways of learning and thinking and acting and doing is also something that's very important that really needs to be added to this. So that's part of it. And our approach to the materials that we use for research is the central part. And I think that's those two things then, I think really are what we probably need to talk about right now.
Let me raise a few questions. Let me take the research methodology from a higher knowledge position to a more scientific position. First of all, I think that it should be systematically organized. Second, I think we should be critical about it with objectivity and some definitional concepts and how we process information and decipher information. Going to research a project, first in mind you have to say, what am I looking for? And when I retain this knowledge, what am I going to do with it? How am I going to be critical of the knowledge? Does the knowledge fit my people? Is the knowledge pro your American knowledge? How can I get this knowledge in a workable way or a palatable way that I can share this knowledge and at the same time point out the discrepancy of the knowledge, so that when the person obtained this knowledge, they said, look, this is where this is what the person was seeing. But when they compare it with this piece, it don't add up. It's just like what Francis Wesley told us the other day. This is what they were seeing. But when they go in a laboratory, from a medical point of view, and start to think about AIDS, then I find out that this seems to me like a man-made thing. And then she documented that. But that is research. We must break it down in a simplistic way so everyone can understand from a systematic way. In the morning you get up, you put on your shorts, your pants, right up till you get dressed. Well, you research your clothes in order to get dressed.
I just wanted to illustrate something. I think this is excellent because the research group, of course, is part of ASCAC, but the purpose of this research group workshop is the input of the community. And the input of the community is what carries all of us in the directions that we need to go into. So this is tremendous. We will need your input. The ASCAC Research Study Group will need your input. All of the study groups will need your input as we go along, because then we have all the proper views and the proper directions to see. So I just wanted to remind us and say that because it's very important, very important. Brother.
Some of the nuts and bolts of methodology, I propose that in this new approach that we don't need specialists in researching. I think the brother was speaking earlier about being multidisciplinary. If you approach your history or your research from just for example, as a psychologist, then you miss the other aspects of that research. And I think we need about creating those people who are like holistic masters of the universe that is truly multidisciplinary, so we can understand the totality of life. And then that, we need continuity. We need this classroom in terms of, we need to get out of the classroom in terms of the methodology. I also propose we need to get out of the library in terms of the methodology. Libraries are a very recent phenomenon, even though it was created by the African people, but it's a very recent phenomenon. It seems prior to that, we have what we call the whole mentorship. That is, you had a person who was a master, master in terms of the crafts, masters in terms of agriculture, astronomy, all the way to zoology. And that person groomed someone to take that place in that community. So it seems to me, in terms of, for example, the Dr. Carruthers and the Martin Luther Kings, who were their proteges? We need that type of very close-knit one-on-one teacher-student relationship. And I think that should be part of this new methodology that we're talking about. Get out of this, you cannot really teach anyone in a classroom type situation. This is very stoic, it's static, and you miss the whole dynamics of life. So I'm saying we need, one thing is get out of these specialist mode of thinking and deal with life as it is. And then bring about this mentorship. So one of the reasons why we have our problems in our research and our history is that we have gaps. There's no mentoring, no constant grooming of the new. There's not a connection between the elders who know and the youth who don't know. So I'm saying, well, we need to have this type of mentorship in our approach.
The state objecting without facts. But in order to do these things that we want to do, cover our history and increase our self-esteem and unification of the universe and the past, our methodology has to be subjective and goal-oriented.
Maybe I'm getting what you're saying. We have to be objective when we deal with the society we're in now, to be able to sift through so much that we're exposed to. But we must be subjective to the natures, wherever they may approach us, in our dreams, as we speak to our relatives, and I'm not speaking to you about this in a way that I know. This is just my view of what this might mean. We have to subject ourselves to things that we've short-circuited ourselves from for so long. And I think that's what the sister was talking about. In the ancient times, there was no question about what was the way to do what there was to do. And
yeah, I'd like to say, to add with that, when we're discussing methodology, we have to engage the process. Where do we start? And the brother that was up there, the brother that was speaking a few minutes ago, the sister, plotted out some ways. He said that there's mentorships. We need to release ourselves from the library. We need to do this. We need to engage with this methodology. What is applicable for us now? Do we rebuild the will? Do we rebuild the will? Do we rebuild something that was already built, right? At this stage again, or do we use what we have? Okay, so we must engage in the thought. We have to use what we have, and we have to project what we can build, the tools that we can build to help us. Right? But there's work that's already been done, right, by African scholars, right, that we need to begin to work that's been stolen by European scholars that we need to reinterpret, right, for us now. So we need to engage the process. Where do we start? Okay, how do we start? Okay, and then that engages the process of how systematically we are, okay, because this is the community aspect. We have a dual function. We have an eldership. We have elder scholars in our community, right? We are just engaging things that was already drawn up that they have helped us to understand by us reading their works. So we are just getting together and brainstorming, making sure that we don't leave anything out, and finding out how much do we know so we can project where the community has to go and what we have to begin to read, how we must read it. We must figure out a measure.
We have to understand, without the family,
there isn't God. If nobody existed, nobody would speak of God, because there would be nobody, and there would be no knowledge of God. So God is dependent on the family. You have to have at least one person to have God declared. So he said it without saying it that way. We think of spiritualism as religion and forgot that spiritualism existed before religion. Spiritualism is that which causes people to be for themselves and their interests. Spiritualism is the fundamental that creates philosophy.
How can it work? How can that model work when it is based upon holding up for honor a family system that is based upon joyless sex? That robs sex, that is normal sex, of its enjoyment. That's something that Dr. Ben Jochannan has been preaching ever since I have known him. He's been trying to educate us on that point. How can we accept a model of family that robs sexual intercourse of its enjoyment? That is normal sexual intercourse. How can we accept a model of family that glorifies orgies and homosexuality? That is, how can we do that? It doesn't work for us. It doesn't really work for them. But certainly we can't accept that model. So what we have to understand is that we cannot be used to dismantle our family and force upon the minds of African people that kind of family model. What we really have to do is to do what Sosostris was talking about, and that is come back to the black land. We have to come back to our own heritage. And we have to look at our family model, because the African worldview put forth a model of the divine family. And that model of the divine family permeates African life from the level of creation to eternity. The idea of the divine family, all African life is conceived of as family life. We see it in the emergence of the concept of creation in ancient Egypt. We see it in the emergence of the cosmologists all over Africa. We see it in the social structure of African people. What we see in Africa is the notion that the family is indeed sacred. That the union between the woman and the man is a sacred union. And that the product of that union is a sacred act of procreation. And thus it is from generation to generation throughout eternity. There is a union of familyhood that begins with God, the maker, the creator. God creates man in our worldview through procreation. And thus we are truly the children of God. We are truly the inheritors of the divine spark, because we have it in it. We have God in us because God is our natural father. That is our concept of the world. And therefore there is no alienation between humankind and divinity. There is no alienation between maleness and femaleness. There is no alienation between parenthood and childhood. When you turn to the European orientation, that's what you find. Starting off with the gods. The gods are warring against each other. The male gods are raping the female gods. The female gods are trying to poison the male gods. And then when they accidentally have children, the children try to bump their daddies and their mamas off. You know, that's their concept of family. That is coming. I mean, the real crisis of family is there. That's where the crisis of family is. You see, when they translate that out into life, what do you have? What is a woman in in the Eurocentric concept of family. What is she but a piece? A piece. And when the man purchases her or just grabs her, whichever tradition they are following, there are two traditions, one is the money tradition and the other is the club tradition. Whichever tradition they follow, when they get her, what they do is declare that they have a monopoly on her vagina. That they determine what goes in it and what comes out of it. And there is no freedom for her to do anything but abide by that monopoly. And then, you see, when the child comes, in the old days, the European father had the right to determine whether that child would live or die. And if the father said, I don't like it, I don't like the way it looks, I don't like the way it smells, then he could throw it away. And they used that with particular force where their female children were concerned. Because they killed all the female children that they thought were excess. And that was a custom among the Europeans down to relatively recent times. I mean, you know, we brought civilization to them. And after many centuries, finally convinced them to give up that habit of female infanticide. And so when they abandoned that, what they adopted was the Lolita phenomenon. Did y'all read Lolita? That is, they used the daughter as another wife. That is the unholy family as compared with the holy family. And so what we have to do is to go back to our holy family and realize that in this effort to rebuild the African world, to restore African civilization, to liberate African people, we don't have any choice but to resurrect our family and to repair the damage that has been done to our family and live on. Let's look at some things for a minute. What have we done? You know, we got one view of what happened to us over the last 500 years. I mean, you know, their view is, well, all y'all were doing over the last 500 years was getting beat up, and the reason you were getting beat up is because you weren't civilized, and we had to beat you to get your attention so you could understand that you're supposed to shape up and become like us. But, you know, we were doing something else altogether different, and it's a shame that more of us don't know what we were doing. Let's take one aspect of what we were doing. The black people, the African people who found themselves in this severe state of depression, this severe state of oppression, when they left those plantations and those cities where they were enslaved and went out into the countryside and went out into the hills and went out into the forest and established their free and independent communities that the white people call maroon communities, what did they take with them? They took their Africanness with them, and they immediately began to form African communities based upon African familyhood. And even in cases where you had one group from the Congo and one individual from the Senegal area, and another individual from the Angola area, and another individual from the Zimbabwe area, they would assemble there in the hills and begin to put together a family. And even though they were from scattered parts of Africa originally, they came upon that African family model and they reconstructed themselves in an African family. They built their communities and they fought for hundreds of years against the European oppressors. And they had some victories. They had some victories. Haiti is one of them. Paul Morris is another. So they had some magnificent victories. And from the bases of that strong African community family that they developed in the hills and the mountains, including North America, there was some here in North America, believe it or not. From the basis of that strong institutional African family, they kept alive the notion of African liberation. They became the core of the African liberation movements that ultimately resulted in the destruction of the chattel slave system. They gave inspiration to all of our foreparents so that we could keep this struggle going from day to day. And then when we look at those who were still held in captivity, for one reason or another could not get out of the captivity, and look at the adaptations they made to the dictate and the mandate on the part of Europeans to dismantle the African family, they put families back together. They took the human African who was there in the vicinity and created new families out of that, so that nobody was outside of a family. Even though there were no blood ties there, they recreated families. They adopted children, not through the law codes, but through the love that they expressed for those who needed help. And so they recreated families. And do you know, the Europeans and their black flunkies looked at those African families with ridicule and criticized those African families, when that was really the most humane and the most civilized thing that was going on in this country. And from there, they went in this age, and let me just rush on here because I want to be on time. And then in more recent times, as we tried to create new families after the chattel slave system was destroyed, they invented the welfare attack. And they tried to dismantle our families through the welfare attack. And every time the black family tried to adjust to a strategy of destruction, and so that we could live on, they came up with another obstacle, trying to destroy the relationship between black women and black men. So now the whole concept that is used in Africa today, called development strategy, is a strategy that is designed to destroy the black family. What they are saying is, in order to get money, you got to stop having babies. You got to have birth control. In other words, stop black babies, because when you stop black babies, you stop black families, and you stop black communities, and thus you make it easier to establish white supremacy in the world. So that assault on us cannot be disguised by having some of us go out here and try to sell this notion that the puritanical family, that the elements of celibacy and masochism and sadism and group groping and other kinds of orgies are authentic forms of family life. What we have to do is reject that and go back to the black land. And that's what ASCAC is attempting to do. The ASCAC movement is a movement founded on the reestablishment of the African family. The ASCAC movement, which was inspired by our elders like John Henry Clark. You know, I met this little man about 20 years ago face to face. I had heard about him, but when I met him face to face, I was inspired, and that's an inspiration that has impelled me forward for the last 20 years. And then I met that other little black man sitting there, Ben Yochannan, and my inspiration was so great. You know, that is what sold me and got me dedicated to this project of the restoration of ourselves. That is what convinced me that we needed to move in this direction. So we ought to go back home. That's why Maulana Karinga and I called the conference in 1984 and tried to bring all of us to the question of let's go back home. That's why 6 of us sit around a table in Los Angeles, including John Clark and Ben Yochannan, and decided to found the ASCAC Association. That's why all of us who are in this room, and all of us throughout this nation, all 700 or 800 of us who have become members of ASCAC, are going forward with this project, because we intend to go back to the black land and to reestablish the black family. We are building a program to reconstruct our history and to glorify our ancestors. There's a song that we sing in the Temple of the African Community of Chicago. It's called Go Up Sinuate, and it's based on the story that I started out with. And it goes to the tune of, they used to sing in the black church all the time, Go Down Moses. And I'm not going to sing it for you, but it goes something like this. Go up Sinuate, way up in Kemet land. and tell our Pharaoh to bring our people home. So what I'm going to say is that we're going back home. We're going this summer, that is, we're going to Kemet, we're going to Aswan, we're going to the place in Kemet where there are still some original Kemetic people. We're going to have a good time there, and we're going to have a spiritual time there. We're going to have a resurrected time there. John Clark is going to be there. Ben Jochannan is going to be there. Asa Hilliard is going to be there. Molina Karinga, Lynn, Rosalind, Sister Kepler is going to be there. We're going to pull Brother Bill there, aren't we, Brother Bill? Right on. Naeem Akbar is going to be there. We all going to be there. Everybody in this room is going to be there, either in spirit and body, or if not in body, certainly in spirit. And what we want to do then, as we go back to the black land, is tell every African in the universe, including those who are physically on the continent, to come back to the black land. See the city where you were born. Kiss the ground at the great gate, and mingle with friends.
I think that our national president, Dr. Carruthers, really summed up spiritualism without calling it that. Because he emphasized on the basis for what is spiritualism. We have to understand, without the family, there isn't God. If nobody existed, nobody would speak of God, because there would be nobody, and there would be no knowledge of God. So God is dependent on the family. You have to have at least one person to have God declared. So he said it without saying it that way. We think of spiritualism as religion and forgot that spiritualism existed before religion. Spiritualism is that which causes people to be for themselves and their interests. Spiritualism is the fundamental that creates philosophy. First, we have the concept of things spiritual, beyond the dimension of that material. When we see a thing, or even we deal in a thing, he dealt with the family. To get a family, we need certain types of behavior, sexual behavior. But within the sexual behavior is the reason for that which causes. And that which causes an action is the spiritual being and intent. That thing that drives us, the thing that drives a child to feel attached to its mother, which needs no explanation from the mother, is that inner self, that spiritualism. You see, we tend to think of spiritualism as spookism, like you've seen on television lately with those ministers who sit to pray to save Jim Baker. That prayer can't save Jim Baker. That's spookism, trying to appeal by prayer to save Baker. You see, Baker lost spiritualism. Now, it is so that we could say religion comes from the spiritualism in a society. It's the deification of the spiritualism that makes religion. So when we sit down today or stand, whatever we do, in our spiritual workshop, we are going to express those inner feelings, those innate feelings that govern ourselves to dominate material and to control ourselves in a manner way and beyond the dollar bill. In God we trust. Our trust would be, yes, in God, but as he said, the God within us. Of course, Jews, Christians, Muslims, and others speak of the God within us without any attempt to deal with it. It is only, I'm trying to say, sophisticated semantics. But spiritualism doesn't have to harp on these catchphrases, because spiritualism works for itself. It speaks to us. I think the greatest form of spiritualism speaking to us is, and I like to use it, a pregnant woman is the greatest understanding of spiritualism. For you fathers who have been close to the woman who has been giving birth to your child, or at least pregnant with your child, you're there long enough to see the development, because most of us don't be there after she tells us that she has lost Mr. Period. We already gone. Some of us go wait. It didn't be told. We have an idea, we just take off. But those of us who wait around, the fact of the quickening of the child moving, the mother with the first child becomes excited, and she tells the man, and he touches the man. What comes from that? Neither of you could see it. Neither of you could really touch the inside, but the spiritualism, that which goes on inside, that talks to your mind and your mind talks to that, that's the depth of your spiritualism. That feeling, that which you can't really express in words, you can't write it, you can't talk it, you can feel it. And unless you experience it, it's like the mother who gives birth, that even another woman who has never given birth cannot say what it is. You can empathize, but you will not know. That's spiritualism, that inner self. I think what they're doing is way too passionate. And you talk about it 2 minutes, but he can't even wait well.
So maybe he can give you just a little brief overview on the purpose again, either by rereading it or just stating it as it comes to his heart to do so. And then he can open up the floor for questions and criticisms mainly on what it is. But maybe, you know, Brother Cox, you could kind of just throw out some ideas on the purpose of research and then open up the floor.
If I might make a suggestion. I think a rereading of the purpose would help, because we don't participate, we don't have it in front of us physically, so it would help us.
Okay, I suggest that we will allow this practice, I think we'll press on this kind of, we can omit the last paragraph because it's kind of rhetorical rather than actual.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, purpose of research. Purpose of research is to research the foundations of African history, considering all levels of its manifestation, political, economic, social, and spiritual, without the distortion of any foreign corruptions. Example, European and Arab, they had their share of manipulation in this regard, and make that information available to the African world community, which includes African scholars and emerging African scholars. African world history, up to this point, has not been presented from an African-centered view. As Dr. Carruthers last hour did mention, that not only from a European-centered view, it's been it's completely stamped on and eliminated in some cases, to the degree where your mind can take its own license and imaginations can run wild and create all kinds of boogeymen, so to speak. Our history is as vast as human history itself, since human history began with us. We must and we will write our own history, researching and using as much information as possible from primary sources available and from our scholars' interpretations. Now, I think that that's a pretty good overview, but I'm Sure, well, research has as many purposes as there are us in here. We all have our own reasons for wanting to do this. And 9 times out of 10, nobody's really asked you before. And as for myself, I feel a wealth of energy just that I didn't know I had in regards to taking on this challenge. So, and it is quite a challenge. It's enough for me just to read April in the year. Not that I've been much of a scholar in the last 20 years or so, but it's not that I had much of a reason to in my own agenda. But it does make for one to rearrange your priorities when you're stepping on and touching on areas of yourself that you didn't have that much of a handle on before. So as I said before, is there any other input or curiosities or just as far as?
Well, I think that the purpose that we read pretty adequately states what we're all probably here for, and that is to learn the truth. We all recognize that African history has been distorted by the Europeans and by the Arabs, primarily the Europeans. And we want to learn the truth because by learning about our true history, we then can develop a more positive image and attitude towards ourselves. So the purpose of research is really to uplift ourselves as African Americans, as Africans.
One piece that I didn't get a sense of from the purpose that you articulated was a didactic sense of purpose that included transmitting the knowledge. I'm thinking primarily of young people, but the purpose of research that includes some idea of moving forward with this as part of the purpose. Not only to learn, but to learn to disseminate. One of the things that because I'm trying to develop my own research, one of the things that I am concerned with is, and is critical to the research that I'm trying to develop, how do I take what I'm putting together and then move forward with that such that I can disseminate that information, in my particular case, to young people. But one of the problems that I'm aware of is that there's a difficulty in interpreting that information such that young people hear it. Often young people are not willing to sit in a setting like this, and yet the information is valuable to them, and we have to, as part of our research, I think, develop ways to reach out and disseminate the information.
I can more or less relate to what you're saying. And as far as on the job once, I was wearing this hat, and as Brother Gil Noble mentioned on his show, or someone had mentioned about the way they put drugs in our community, is they made it an in thing. And the sister on the job said, where did you get that hat? They are wearing them now. And I thought it was kind of interesting because she would be interested in it only because it's an in thing. But I see that this is like what you said, making people wanting to do this. It's like a code that we have to break. We've been programmed to the Western mindset to the degree where anything contrary to that is more or less contrary to me feeling comfortable with myself. So it is a difficult job. We have to get creative enough to make this the end thing for the children. And I guess that as we, as a congregation of people, become family with one another, it can become in as they will meet other children. We all have our families to interrelate with. So this is a very, very significant approach to have to deal with.
I don't mean to dominate the conversation.
Oh, please do.
But it seems that a critical part of the dissemination of the information has to do with, as part of research, developing ways of communication such that the information is transferable where people are and within a framework that people are understanding. Just using the example you used about the young woman saying they're wearing those these days. It seems that part of what we might want to include in our purpose with the research is the development of methods and tactics that will enable us to go with the concept, the Western world concept of they're wearing that these days. That's what she is, and it seems that part of our research would out of necessity include ways by which we can take that faddism and make it receptive to the information we're looking to disseminate.
As a participant in this panel, the question that is being raised about it, my experience about it goes something like this. First of all, that I have to understand the thing. I'm researching supposedly, but I find that my original thing was, oh, I'm going to learn it and I'm going to teach somebody. Doesn't mean that I really understand it at all. I found that for me, I had to understand it a bit and then continually absorb it. And in the course of it, I found I had to begin to change the way I was doing things to correspond to what I thought was the newfound truth. That was my actual experience. So I had to lose the attitude that now I have some information that somebody else doesn't have, and I'm about to give it to them, and therefore I can teach them. I forgot all about that. First thing I had to do was begin my own transformation in terms of the newfound information. Then when you're talking about giving it to the youth, and you use the example about this question of the fad, would you believe that only 30 years ago, black people created the fads? When you look at the clothing today, 30 years ago, before we had the desegregation, we came out, we had peg pants, we had 30-inch trousers, we had the big brims, and we introduced that into the society. When you go to the music, of course it's a known fact, we introduced it, they made rock and roll, and if you want to hear some jazz, you gotta go back to 30 or 40 years. So the fact of it is that only, I think, and I'm not saying this is wrong, I'm saying as a participant, this is my thought about it, that the creativity already exists, the potential within us. What happened, I think, is that these coming generations have been literally grabbed by TV and media and everything, and they have now been stamped with the dominant Western values, where before, because of our isolation from the society in terms of segregation, even here in New York, we had to create our own culture. Now they have created a culture that our kids feel that they got to be a part of. So that the problem becomes, I think, to basically restore the concept of African self in the community, or I would say we had only remnants of it at that time, and then to build on that, not only in terms of opposition to what exists, but for its own worth for the individuals we're giving it to. That makes sense? That's
yes, Brother Bill. Before you start, I want to speak to the fact that I was dabbling in a few different things, and I met Brother Mel, who more or less brought me to you all, so I think that I just wanted to speak to that. When the student is ready, the teacher somehow comes around, and I don't know who said it, but
I hope you're right.
When we're talking about disseminating, I think we're talking about education, and I think that's tomorrow, right? But on that note, we have schools like Naira. It was the Chad in Newark. The black community does not support the school. And if you're going to try to disseminate it, you're going to have to catch the kids very young. And then they're going to have to go into a total African concept of education. Then it's going to become the thing. But when we keep sending them to European schools, setting them up in front of TV, we're going to have very little chance. Our purpose for coming out here and researching and finding the information, somebody mentioned truth. I don't know how much truth there is in the world. What I want is historically, objectively, reasonably provable facts. You know, as far as truth, I really don't know what that means. We can be as dishonest with ourselves as they have been with their history if we want to be. We have to look at our sources, come to some sort of agreement how we're going to use the sources and what purpose we're going to use them for. We're going to have to come up with some sort of consensus that's going to be agreed upon by the African community as a whole, not just the ASCAC, worldwide African community as a whole, so that we have some direction. And then from that point, we can move.
I agree. To speak to that, I find it difficult. You can do a lot with your own kids if you're so truly blessed. I mean, a lot of us can have our kids, but when you start to talk about doing something to other people's kids, it's kind of touchy there. I got kids in the neighborhood that won't let me cut my own grass, but it's one thing putting them to work. Telling them something is another thing. You know, the parents are wondering, what are you telling them? And why are you telling them? Why do you care? And I hope that maybe we can bounce that around.
Well, one of the things that I guess I had several feelings when we were talking about research and what it means. And I think that one of the things that comes to mind most easily is Dr. Leonard Jeffrey's statement that we have to become culturally literate. We have to really begin to understand and know and recognize what is ours presently and was ours historically. And I was thinking when you mentioned the business of, the sister that said that you over there wearing those hats now, she might not have had any idea that the popular hat, which is the Eddie Murphy type hat, is probably what she was identifying your hat with and recognizing that yours is African and has historical value. I think that it's so difficult for us to really, one, recognize what's ours and recognize the manner in which it changes us and our interaction with each other. Even when we think of things, the brother said that he wants objective truth. If we really begin to, objective fact, but if we begin to understand the way that some of the ancients approached the knowledge and understanding, as in my reading and listening to some of the presentations, it was almost the opposite of objectivity. Objectivity, as I understand it, would be more in the framework of what we're battling with, in contemporary society. Subjectivity is the thing, according to many of the people whose opinions we respect, that we had been taught was negative, but really wasn't in fact. But did in fact represent a higher level of development. The ability to be culturally literate, the ability to recognize the symbols, to look at them, to distill the essence from them, and then to take that in within yourself and change it to something else. And that's not objective. It's difficult. And I think that it was also helpful for me too that that as we approached our research group that there were at least 5 basic books whose philosophies and ideas were very important and helpful to us. Because it's difficult. I think it's even more difficult for adults to change a view that they've had from childhood than it is to, you know, as the brother said, start with someone that's new and young. But I just don't believe that we can't change. I'm not ready to accept that. But I think we have to recognize, you know, ours as our American.
I agree.
And it is doing.
The brother that you want to make a comment?
Going back to comments about schools, I agree exactly with what you're saying about support as far as the African community in relation to that. But part of the reason that it's come up goes back to something that Brother Jones was saying. We have a situation where I think the easiest way to do it is that you have to live what you're going to expound. And in that situation, if you show children love, and this example, I know a Child Creative Educational Center in Long Island, and also in my area, one of the key elements for the teaching of truth or of facts is just showing the warmth. A lot of the brothers that are out there now are trying to survive only. Talking about the young children. They're not looking at trying to understand themselves and know how beautiful they are. Because if you look at it from Superman Command, it's a situation where the child looks in the mirror and it sees a white child instead of himself. When they start to see the love of a brother, some of us as elders, hugging them, giving them that support, and then we're doing the same with the young sisters. What that does is that child sees that example and then says, well, I'm somebody, and they can't tell me that that's not the case.
Until we support a school like that, my area's had financial difficulty now for years. The call has been going out over and over again. I mean, and we do not support that school. That might be the one building that we could salvage, and it has a definite purpose. When you look at the graduates of the schools and what they have accomplished, right? Okay, now there's no way, and it's been in existence since when, 72? Right. All right, so now it has a history, it has had a purpose, and they're going on. But where's the support? And the brothers were knowledgeable about their African history as anybody, all right? Now what are we going to say? They know their history, they're getting the love, so forth and so on, but they're going to let the people take that building away from them and let the school down. And when you go back in the same position.
Well, what about it?
Excuse me. I didn't want us to get off and specifically discuss my area or institutions in terms of education. I wanted us to keep the conversation in terms of the purpose of research, which is what we are discussing now. Why it is important for us as a people to discuss research, what we hope to achieve through research, and how and why we should do research right now. I really don't want us to kind of get off and discuss Nairi. I think I'd like to kind of limit this to the purpose of research as we were discussing.
Can I raise a question?
Sir.
There is a workshop on African education. Yeah, is that a topic that's appropriate for that workshop?
May I respond? What we have to be aware of is that we have set them up as categories, but they're not categories. We're going to go through the educational process in the education panel, but we're also going to be talking about research, spirituality, and creative arts. If you look at what we're attempting to do, is to bring together all of these areas in an African fashion. The European methodology has been to categorize everything. What we are saying is that even though we have used the categories, this too is the education panel.
I like to say, it's interesting to know of the Child Development Center or Child Creative Education Center on Long Island, a panel like, or a room of us like this, is interesting to share this information.
That was the beginning of my point. Research, how research ties in is the fact that part of the problem is that we just don't know. A lot of the reasons that Nairi and Child Creative Education Center has had so much problem has been two factors. One, the support factor, and two, the lack of knowledge factor. And research is about that. we research and look for things, and we become proficient in that methodology, then we're going to find those schools and then make the thing work.
But networking in general is very
So can we say that one of the main purposes of research is to develop our knowledge of self, which will ultimately raise the self-esteem of our people in general and take us on a path of defining our own destiny, get us from under the heel of slavery?
Have any thoughts on that?
I'll ask you a question. When you put up a concept on research, you have to deal with methodologies.
Yes, that's the next area we're going to deal with.
So, I'm ahead of it. I'm premature. Sorry.
Okay, but we're dealing, that's the next area. We're going to deal with purpose first, then discuss methodology, and the last area will be the tools of research. But right now, I want to get a summary on the purpose. Yes.
Just by way of including, because somehow or another, and maybe I'm overly focused there, but including what I first mentioned about the didactic aspect, it seems that what other people have been saying is consistent with an educational inclusion in the purpose of research. And I think that that's consistent with my own sense when I first mentioned the thing about didactic. And just by way of developing a purpose, I guess my point is that the inclusion of the ability to disseminate that information effectively seems as if it would be important in the development of a purpose.
Well, if we're going to get the information, the truth about ourselves, the truth as much as possible, to raise the self-esteem and of the African community as a whole, then it would include the education of the African community and the dissemination of the knowledge, unless the whole African community does research.
In that regard, a lot of times we're in company of people, and we're just talking about current events. And for instance, the news that I've been hearing lately is about how I guess it would be the Babylonian culture is just being given credit for being the first agriculturalist due to the fact that they devised a way of making beer. This was their way of making beer. And I don't know that much about it. I've just heard it over the news the last few days. But in my research, I will try to challenge this. And on the job, in the street, when this topic comes up, for instance, just to be able to challenge it is disseminating information. So that when you know the truth that you see, it may not be the truth, the absolute truth, but just to have an argument, it stimulates more investigation. So a lot of people pass things off, and we just swallow it because we don't know any better. So that's one way I know it.
I would like to ask, Jen, based on what you just said, would that raise a fourth segment of this, say, use of research? When we have purpose, method, tools, and after we get the research, after we know these things, how are we going to use them? That would give us a fourth.
That's we do cover that. That goes into our
I just wondering about use of it.
But wouldn't that be included?
It should be the purpose of research.
To be equipped to be equipped to be able to handle these subjective statements that are made sometimes. That I feel very uncomfortable when things are said, but if you don't have any valid argument, what can you say?
Well, the use would be education. The use would be education. It seems to me that research is the uncovering of new information. And we're going to talk about the methods and tools, but then the use is really education.
I would like to add to that, I would say the use would be the implementation of that knowledge in our day-to-day lives. And that would be from really educated.
I'm a little confused on where we are on this because I'm a little confused as to where we all are with this because I'm thinking, isn't the research, or is it understood already that the research is supposed to, when we've acquired all the facts and all that, and we know all the facts, isn't it supposed to be used to unite all the brothers and sisters here and, other places? Isn't it supposed to be used for that purpose?
But you determine that. We are determined to determine that.
Okay.
That's what we're discussing now. What's the purpose, And you're saying that you feel that it should also be used to unite?
Right, for the unification of all the brothers and sisters here and abroad, everywhere.
Okay. Yeah.
Excuse me. I just wanted to mention that what you're talking about is very, very true. That comes under, all of that comes under the education of the African community. Because as you become educated, and as we educate others, transitions of that education manifest itself in the community, which cause you to start to talk about educating other areas and other Africans in other parts of the world and that type of thing. The whole transition of a community takes place with the basis of research and disseminating of that education in the community.
Yes, but Brother Barry, what he's saying that that's one of the purposes of the research is for the unification of the community.
As a whole.
Okay, personally, to me, when I think of the research, I go as far as not only the history and the actual dates and search out the truth of what was incorrect and what needs to be corrected, but to actually go back and look at the relationships of everyday life between the people, the relationships of the officials toward the people, the relationships of parents to children, the relationships of men to women, and male-female relationships, the relationships of the actual people, and to take their attitudes and their culture, for lack of a better word, and to study this, and to take that and bring it back here and apply it to ourselves now, as our brother Bill Jones said, the transformation process of oneself. And then we can come together with each other as a whole. And I can see from that how everything else can fall into place. If we take the actual relationships between the people in everyday life, their attitudes, why they related to each other the way they did, and how they thought, and their thought process, and then take the best of it and apply it to the best of what we have now, and transform ourselves, and then everyone, we'll transform. I think it'll be a natural process, and the education will come together, the schools will come together for our children, and it was a great, they built great civilizations, and that's what we're trying to do, is reconstruct our civilization.
Can you come right up in a second?
To actually study the actual relationships of the people to each other, of adults to children, of the officials to the people, the basis for nations are male-female relationships, but the basis for relations for a male-female relationship is the relationship that one has with oneself. You can't have a successful relationship with anyone else before you have a successful relationship with yourself, first of all. Then you can have a successful male-female relationship. And male-female relationships build nations, well, family, city, towns, and nations. And when we have those type of successful relationships, that's why I say we have to study their attitudes and their thought and how they conducted their everyday life. And then from there, we take that and emulate it, practice it to the best of our ability. And it worked then. I hope it works now somewhat for me.
Yes.
I'd like to also echo what the brother was just saying, that the key words here when we talk about the purpose of research is synonymous with education, and it's synonymous with knowledge, and it's synonymous with unity. I think there has to be some relevancy to what we're doing in terms of in the research. And the bottom line is that it has to enhance one's own knowledge of themselves in terms of the relationships, not only with men and females, but the relationship with all universal elements. And once you have that understanding, which comes from the research, which comes from the education, then there's a sense of unity. The understanding of things around you puts you in union or in communion with those things around you. And out of that unity, once you have that unity, which comes from knowledge, then you can expand that unity or that universalness to with your community and with things around you. So it seems to me that it's of essence that when we talk about education, that it has to be a connection in terms of uniting us with the understanding of things around us. I think one of the reasons why our students who are in these public school systems are rebellion is simply because they don't see the connection of what they're learning with their own selves and with the community around them. So I think looking at that research for the sake of research has to have the priority in terms of making that connection. And therefore I'm saying that research or education equals knowledge, which at the end of that comes unity. And then as a byproduct of that is happiness. All of the purpose of research and education is to make you happy. When you know about yourself, when you know your relationship with things around you, you feel good about yourself. And when you feel good about yourself, then you don't need to go after these other things that society has for you to feel good, such as drugs, such as the religions or books or et cetera, et cetera. When you feel good about yourself, then you don't need nothing outside of yourself in order to be good. And that is, I think, is the essence of research and the essence of education. Again, it's the equation in terms of education equals knowledge, equals unity, equals happiness or love.
Okay. Yes.
I think I would say one of the purposes